Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard. I'm TCaptainX. If you're looking to quickly improve your skills in Warzone with better aim and movement, then pay close attention. I have helped thousands of Call of Duty gamers improve their gameplay over the years with these tried and true methods. Now, before we jump into specific practice methods, we absolutely need to get your guys' settings right, because that is the foundation of your gameplay, and unfortunately the default settings in Warzone are not very good. So to make your guys' lives a little bit easier, I've taken basically the top 6 players in Warzone. These were basically the top 2 teams, the last big Warzone Pro tournament here, and I've listed all their sensitivities, ADS multiplier sensitivity, their FOV, aim response curve type, and then their dead zone for their right stick. These are kind of the most important settings when it comes to our sensitivity. Now, when it comes to your base sense, you'll notice that typically the lower your base sense is, the higher your ADS sense needs to be. It needs to be closer to 1. So Biffle plays on a pretty low base sense, but he keeps his ADS sense at 1 to kind of offset that. Another thing you'll notice is that none of these players are playing on crazy high sensitivities. A lot of people think they need to be at like max sensitivity to have good movement and stuff, and that is just so far from the truth. I just don't recommend really going any higher than maybe like 1.9 or 2 at the highest, but honestly I think 1.8 is probably as high as you would need to go. As far as the low end of the scale, if you really struggle and you feel like everything is too fast for you, maybe 1.4 would probably be the absolute lowest I would go. Anything lower than that, you're just gonna struggle in close quarters to be able to move around quick enough. So I'm somewhere in the middle there at 1.7, 1.7. I do recommend keeping both of these the same, although some people like to turn their vertical stick a little bit lower. Personally, I think it's weird. I just like to keep it 1 to 1. If we tab over to aiming and then open sensitivity multiplier, this is where your ADS sensitivity multiplier is. So this is where you can make your sense slow down when you aim the gun. Now, if you are totally clueless on what to do with your sense, a very crude test you can do is pick a random point here and then try to just like flick your aim and try to stop on that point. If you are consistently flicking way past it, then your sense might be too high. If you flick under it, then your sense might be too low. It's a very rough idea. It's not perfect. And then you can also do the same thing with aiming. So ADS and then try to, flick and stop your aim and see how good you are at doing it. Again, it's a rough idea. Also look at your aiming. Do you feel like you're all over the place and you're shaky with your aim? Maybe you need to turn down. Or do you feel like you are slow and you can't keep up with enemies? Maybe you need to turn your sense up. And then going into the aiming advanced settings here, this is where our aim response curve type is be. Every single top player plays on dynamic. It's basically no question. Dynamic is going to give you the benefit of where it will allow you to be a little bit more precise and have more control in the mid range, but you can ramp up and turn around and move very quickly and kind of have best of both worlds. Now, the big thing I want to say here is if you are someone who is trying to change your sense, there is no perfect sense. A lot of it comes down to just finding one that feels right and sticking to it and then mastering that sense over weeks and months of practice. Obviously, make sure your target aim assist is on. This is the bread and butter of any controller player. We'll talk a little bit more about aim assist and kind of how to abuse it in some ways. Do not play with motion sensor behavior. Just don't do it. And then back over to the controller tab here with dead zones here. Almost all of the top players are playing between about 2 to 5. So you'll see here a few of these guys are on 2, 3, 5. I am on 0. I like 0, but I might go back to about 2 or 3. The reason I'm on 0 is I have what's called TMR sticks in my controller. This allows me to get basically 0 stick drift, and I can always reset that back to 0. It's like a upgraded Hall effect stick that is way more accurate and precise. I would not recommend almost anyone play on 0 dead zone. It's just way too sensitive. If you feel very jerky on the stick, like if you feel like your aim is jerky and that you overshoot things, then probably playing closer to like 3 or 5 on that right mid dead zone is going to be best. With your left stick, same thing here. You want this really probably to match whatever your right stick is, as long as you're not getting any stick drift there. But for your left stick maximum, definitely turn this down a bit. Anywhere from about 60 to 80, it's just gonna make it a little bit more responsive when you are moving with that left stick. And then with the right stick minimum, the big thing is we just don't want any stick drift. So you're gonna see, if I zoom in, my center dot is moving ever so slightly. Having that amount of stick drift is perfectly fine. If it's just like bare, like even like this, I'm starting to apply some pressure. That amount of stick drift, it's not a big deal. But if you're having stick drift where you're like moving constantly really fast when you're not touching your analog stick, that is too much. And then you're gonna want to go in and up that right stick minimum dead zone until that stick drift is 0 or extremely minimal. If you're having to go above like 8, 9, or 10 to get rid of your stick drift, you probably just need a new controller. This is where I would recommend investing in a controller that has Hall effects, or especially TMR sticks like mine, because you can always reset this and you will never get stick drift. Regular controllers, you cannot fix stick drift. You just can't. Keep your right stick max at 99, and then for your triggers, this doesn't really matter for me because I have what's called digital tap triggers, or like mouse click triggers. If you are shooting with L2, R2, I would turn these very low though, like 10 or less. And with that, we need to now talk about our button layout. So this again will depend on the controller you have. Now I am playing on a controller that has 4 paddles on the back. So all of my action buttons, my X, circle, my jump, all that stuff are bound to these back paddles. What that allows me to do is very simple. It means I can slide, jump, do all these things without having to take my thumb off the analog stick. Whereas if you didn't have paddles, you would have to take your thumb off the analog stick and you cannot aim and move simultaneously. Now, if you're someone that you're just stuck with a regular controller, that is totally fine. We do still have some options. Number one is gonna be actually changing the way you hold your controller and playing what's called claw. To me, this feels very awkward. You're basically gonna take your right index finger, you're gonna curl it down so that you can hit these buttons. To me, it's just too awkward. I don't have the flexibility to do it, but a lot of people can. If that doesn't work, the next thing that you can do is in your button layout here, on the different presets here, the simplest way is just to go to tactical. What tactical will do is it switches your jump and your slide. And so when we press in on the right analog stick, or R3, that's how we can do our slide canceling. So then now we can slide cancel and slide in general without having to take our thumb off the analog stick. However, this does not allow us to jump at the same time. We do still have to take our thumb off the analog stick to jump. So to solve that, the next best option is going to be go down to what's called bumper jumper tactical. This is definitely a bit awkward to learn for some people, but there are a lot of excellent players that do play on this. This makes your L1 your jump. It switches your L1 with your X. And so your L1 is now our jump. So that's how we can do that. We can keep aiming, and then R3 is still gonna be to slide. I totally understand that this is definitely very awkward, but it will be worth it in the long run. It will absolutely make you a better player once you get used to it. Now again, I'm playing default because I have those paddles. Stick layout preset, just leave this on default unless for some reason you prefer switching these. Most people do not like that though. And then again, if you're on a normal controller, I would highly consider swapping your L1, R1 with L2, R2. So this will make it so that you aim with L1 and you shoot with R1 instead of those triggers. The benefit to that is that those don't have that big trigger pull, so it's a little bit easier and faster to do so. Now, ultimately, if you are serious about getting better at Call of Duty or really any FPS game, in today's day and age, you have to have a custom controller like mine. It is just a massive advantage compared to playing on a regular controller. So I'm gonna walk you through, there's 4 unique advantages that this controller offers compared to other controllers. So number one, we already talked about the paddles, being able to hit those buttons and not take your thumb off the analog stick. The way mine are bound is my bottom 2 are slide and jump. So bottom right is slide, bottom left is jump. If you have a controller with 2 paddles, that's really all you need. But the top 2, the extra 3rd and 4th are very nice. And so for me, my top right is gonna be my YY, or how I play switch weapons. My top left is square, or that is gonna be my reload or loot. This also has the digital tap triggers. So these are mouse click. They're super responsive. It makes shooting semi-auto guns like pistols much faster and easier to do. But the cool thing is you can actually just toggle this off by hitting that kind of button down here. And then now it goes to a full trigger pull. So in case you wanted to play another game like a racing game, you can do that. And then bam, you just hit it back and you can go back to that FPS mode. And then you'll also notice that my right analog stick is taller than my left. And this basically just gives me more surface area to aim, allows me to be a lot more accurate, at long distance fights, especially sniping and things like that. And the cool thing is you can actually change these, but these are very firmly planted in here. They're not gonna fall off. If you're playing on a regular controller, definitely you could get a control freak, which will pop on. I would definitely recommend that on your right stick because it just helps a lot with having more accuracy and stuff. Now, the other thing that you can't really tell about this controller is that this controller has what's called TMR sticks. So these are like a Hall effect, but they're way more accurate and precise. What that is it allows you to reset and recalibrate the dead zones so that you never have stick drift. I can get this down to 0 dead zone and have no stick drift, but the TMRs are way more accurate and way more precise than the Hall effects. The Hall effects can feel a little bit wonky at times and not like 1-to-1. The TMRs, like ever since I got this controller with the TMRs, it is the best my aim has been, and it's just so responsive. I absolutely love it. And then one little small bonus thing, which is more of an aesthetic thing, is you actually can pop off these face plates, and these are just magnetic. And so if you wanted to change the design of your controller, you could buy a new faceplate. I think they're only like 15 or 20 bucks and get a whole new looking design without having to get a completely new controller. And then the last thing that AIM offers over other controller companies is that these come with a lifetime warranty. So if any of these modded parts break, you just send them an email, say, hey, it broke, and all you gotta do is pay for shipping. You send it in, they fix it, they send it back to you. So if you guys are interested in upgrading your controller, I am gonna walk you guys through exactly how mine is built. If you don't care, feel free to skip ahead. I will say I am obviously partnered and sponsored by AIM, but I have been working with them, gosh, I think it's been like over 3 years now. And they are just hands down the best controller in my opinion. I've tried a lot of different controller brands. There are lots of people in my community that have trusted me and absolutely swear by AIM and have gotten so much better because they upgraded their controller. So I'm gonna walk you guys through this. They do have PS5, PS4, and Xbox controllers. All of these controllers are officially licensed, meaning they are not knockoffs. They will work also on console or on PC. I am using a PS5, and this is what I would recommend if you're someone who's playing PS5 or on PC. So if you go to the build your own custom PS5 controller. Now the first part is all aesthetics. There are tons of different designs that you can do in here. I do have my own if you want to support it. They also have an option in here where you can go in here and you can design your own panel. It's under the PS5 one. You can basically upload pictures and make your own custom design if you wanted to do that too. Now the rest of this, it's all purely aesthetics here. So I believe for mine, it is all blacked out. If we were doing exactly the way that mine is set up, everything is completely blacked out. I do have the digital buttons. What these do is they replace those top buttons, your X, all these, with a digital click. With the sale going on, the way it's structured, it's a one price, no limit sale. So if you use my code TCaptainX, the price is capped at $209. So like you might as well put it on and make it as expensive as possible. If this sale ends by the time you're watching this video, I would say this is not a necessity because you're not gonna use these buttons that much since you're gonna be using the paddles instead. Next is gonna be the TMR. Absolutely recommend you get the TMR. Again, this is how you get rid of dead zone. I have a separate video on how to recalibrate the TMR to get it back to 0 dead zone and also how to overclock your controller as well. I'll make sure that's linked in the description. For the aim sticks, when you choose a base, just choose any color. It doesn't matter. So I use black on mine. Once you've chosen the base, that allows you to choose the stick height. So I use a small left that's 2 millimeters taller than default. And then I use a high right. They do have the ones where you can do the PS stick or the Xbox stick if for some reason you prefer that. I think it's just like they're almost the same thing. It's just like the rubber grip is a little bit different, but I use the PS high. So this one is 6 millimeters taller on the right. Now the cool thing is when you select these, they're gonna send you multiple options. So like if you end up not liking one and you wanna just go back to playing like small on both sides, you can do that. Under the rings, mine are just left standard. This is like the rubber ring that goes around the analog stick. For the touchpad, leave that alone if you're putting a custom design on here because it will remove that custom design. For the paddles, this is no cost. I do have mine as red. They just stand out more, but again, that's preference. I do highly recommend you get the grip. This gives it a rubber backing. So when your hands start to get kind of sweaty and oily and stuff, it just makes it a lot easier to hold on to the controller. You can pick the color or whatnot, but I use black. You can add your own little logo. So you can add like text and whatnot stuff if you wanted to add that here. Again, that's totally optional. And then the smart bumpers. I do have the smart bumpers. This makes the L1, R1 going to be also that digital tap, a little bit more responsive. This is definitely not as noticeable as having it in the L2, R2. That comes default no matter what. The L2, R2 are going to be those digital taps. But again, with the way this sale is structured, you might as well add it because this price is gonna come massively down here in a little bit. The vibration motors, I personally take mine out. This makes the controller feel very, very light. So if you like that heavy feeling, leave them on. I never use vibration, but if you want that on for certain games, then you just leave them in. Now, this seems crazy expensive, and I understand that, but here's the magic. When we go and we type in here code TCaptainX, we hit apply. This is gonna knock like $200 off, $204 off. So $232 after shipping. They do ship internationally. They ship worldwide, actually. You can use my code anywhere. The only downside is if you are not in the US, I don't think you can get my design. I believe my design is US only, but you can still use my code anywhere in the world. All right, so we're gonna fly through the rest of our settings here with movement. First, tactical sprint assist, I'd recommend. This makes it so as soon as you press forward on the left stick, you are full out sprinting, and this is gonna be the best for movement. Make sure your sprint assist delay comes down to 0, and I would leave both of these ones on. Mantle assist, recommend that you turn all of your mantle settings off, except there's one that I'm gonna show you. I don't know why they have the settings laid, like the mantle settings are all over the place, but for this one, you're gonna wanna leave off. Crouch assist, just go ahead and leave off. It doesn't really make that much of a difference. Corner slicing is completely optional here. So what corner slicing is when you come around a corner, your guy will kind of lean. Let me get a better corner here. So see how he kind of leans? This doesn't make that big of a difference. Some people, it's distracting. It probably doesn't make that much of a difference towards your enemy POV, but it might ever so slightly give you better angles, so you might as well leave it on. For your slide dive behavior, definitely recommend hybrid here. Hybrid is going to be by far the best, but it is the hardest to learn. What hybrid does is when I am moving forward, if I'm not pressing in on L3, if I'm just moving forward on the left stick, but I hit my slide button, I slide. However, if I wanted to dive, I press in on L3 or I press in on the left analog stick, then I hit slide, I will dive. And so if you want to play with hybrid, you basically have to play with your tactical sprint assist on. It just doesn't really work otherwise. Now, if you can't learn this and it's too awkward, then what I would recommend you do is do tap to slide. This is kind of how it used to be back in MW3. And then under the show more, just make sure the delay is set to short. And so if you want to dive now, you hold your slide button. This does create a slight delay though when you hit slide. It's not as fast and responsive as it would be if you were on hybrid. Automatic airborne mantle, leave that off. Both of these sprint settings, make sure they are on. It makes slide canceling a lot easier to do. Parachute automatic, this one definitely should be off. I have no idea how that got turned on. Mantle cancels reload, doesn't really matter. I leave that off. Movement advanced settings here. Leave this a toggle, off on the auto move forward. Grounded mantle, I do recommend you turn on. So what grounded mantle does is if you are up on a ledge and you hit jump, your guy will mantle over it like this. If it's off, he'll just kind of awkwardly jump. And this is where, especially in Warzone, you can kind of get stuck and it ends up being really awkward. And so it just makes getting through windows much, much easier if you have that setting on. Now, one other option, if you don't like auto tac sprint or tactical sprint assist on, if you put your tactical sprint activation to single tap run, and then if you were to go back and turn your tactical sprint assist to like off or just on, what this will do is when you push forward on the left stick, nothing happens, like you just walk, right? But it only takes one press of the left stick to get into that tac sprint or that really fast movement speed. So especially if you're someone that you like to hip fire up close, you're a little bit slower player, you like to use shotguns, that setting might be better for you. And then plunging underwater, I just do free, and then sprinting door bash, you're gonna leave that on so that when you sprint through a door, your guy will open the door. Vehicle advanced settings here, I don't think I've really changed anything here. Going over to combat settings here. So ADS behavior, make sure it's on hold, weapon mount activation, ADS plus a melee. There's a few options. Do not do ADS. You will accidentally mount on everything. I don't really like double tap, but that's an option as well. Make sure this is on hold melee for your dedicated melee. So this is where you hold R3 to get your melee out so that you can walk around faster. Body shield, this is totally personal preference. I like the body shield more because it's funnier, so I've set mine to body shield only. Armor plate, make sure it's apply all, C4 all at once is fine. Equipment behavior, hold or toggle, this is totally personal preference. So hold is when I hold R1, I have to keep holding the button. When I let go, it will go, but then toggle would be the opposite. Toggle would be, I would hit it once, it would hold it, I would hit it again to throw it. Manual fire behavior, leave this one on press, but if you have a really slow trigger finger and you struggle to shoot semi-automatic guns, like a pistol, putting it on hold basically turns it into full auto. However, it's not going to be as fast as it could be if you were just spamming the trigger really quickly. Combat advanced settings here, I don't think okay, so the one setting that you definitely want to make sure you change in here is going to be your interact reload behavior. Want to make sure this is on prioritize interact. This makes looting just a one tap, but then you have to hold your reload button if you're around loot. If you're not able to interact with anything, if you just hit your reload button once, it'll automatic reload. It's going to always prioritize picking things up and looting faster. Now, I am not going to go through all of the graphic settings here because I have a dedicated video for that alone, but I do want to cover under the view tab of your graphic settings, under field of view, this is a very important setting. Anywhere from generally 110 to 120 is going to be ideal for Warzone. The narrower and the smaller you go, the more zoomed in you are and the slower it's going to make it feel like you're moving around. Now, the benefit is that targets appear a lot bigger when you have a lower FOV, but you lose your peripheral vision. So on the flip side, if I crank this all the way back up to 120, you're going to see it zooms out a bunch. That door looks a lot smaller now, but I now can see much more around me. And when I move, it feels like I'm moving a lot faster than I am. So recently, everybody used to always play on 120, but more recently, a lot of pros have started to turn this down just slightly. So I've turned mine down to about 115. I don't think there's a magic number. Again, 110 to 120 I think is all fine, but 115 just make things feel a little bit closer, and you're barely losing any of that periphery vision. For your ADF field of view, make sure this is on affected. Affected is gonna keep that field of view nice and wide. Independent is kind of a weird one. It keeps it wide, but when you zoom in, it zooms in a lot when you ADS. So if you really struggle to see people when you're shooting, you could consider playing on independent. Weapon field of view, keep that to wide, third person, 90, vehicle, wide. And then all of these camera settings, make sure these are on off or on least. This is just gonna make things a lot better in terms of visibility and stuff. Now, I am not gonna go fully into my audio settings here because I use Art is War's custom audio. So if you're interested in doing that, it is a PC only thing, but look up Art is War on YouTube. If you're on console, probably the best thing I'm gonna recommend most of you guys do is either gonna be the Treyarch or Sucker Punch is probably gonna be best. It's not gonna make a huge difference at the end of the day, in all honesty though. You're kind of limited to what you can do. And I will say this season audio has been like worse than it ever has for some reason. Under the interface settings here in the readability tab, go down to color customization. I get asked a lot about this, why my enemies appear pink on the minimap, and I just have the color changed here. So it's the this one right here with the check mark on it is the one that I use. Again, it's totally personal preference. You don't have to do that. But color filter, I do recommend going to filter 2, both, and then 100. Just makes your game pop a little bit more vibrant, easier to see stuff. And then over to gameplay HUD, what I would recommend you guys do is go down to crosshair. Make sure this is on or on center dot, really whichever you prefer. Center dot is just the dot and doesn't have the lines. So it's really either or there. Either do larger or largest so that you can visually see that dot a little bit better. And then change that color to whatever pops for you. For most people, this is usually like a green color. Some people like blue, some people like kind of like a purple, just whatever color stands out to you so you can visualize and center on things easier. Another thing, if you keep scrolling down here in HUD, you can turn down the opacity of some of these things. So like the medals and notifications will pop up and are super big and like on your screen. So I have them turned all the way down. Like honestly, I'm probably just gonna turn them down to 0. And this means so that they aren't like as visible and they're not like blinding your screen when they pop up. So now let's finally get into actually some game tips that we can do to instantly get better. And the biggest thing that I see from like newer to average level players that they struggle with is centering and being prepared to fight. So a lot of people, they tend to run down where their center dot is at the ground. They're always looking for loot and they're not ready to like fight. And so the problem is if somebody comes out around this corner and I'm aiming down here, you have to correct your aim up first before you can start shooting. Versus if I'm coming through here, the only place an enemy can logically come from is around this corner. So as I'm coming around this corner, I want my center dot to be at chest height of where an enemy is going to be. And I want to loop around that corner and hug that corner as I'm coming around with my center dot. So I don't want to come out and then abruptly turn because then I'm losing time where there could be an enemy down here. I want to hug that corner and always have great centering. So if somebody is there, I'm ready to go. And then you start combining that with movement. So as you're coming around corners, you are adding with that centering that you are going to be sliding around those corners and starting to pre-aim where enemies are most likely to be. Because in Call of Duty, time is everything. And so getting that first shot is going to be absolutely crucial. Now I have a dedicated movement video and I would recommend you guys go watch that, but for some quick, simple stuff, the biggest thing is that when we are going around corners, we don't want to just walk around the corner and aim. We want to use movement because we come around much faster, more aggressive, and it allows us to start aiming as we come around that corner. So instead of coming out then aiming, if I'm doing it with a slide, I'm already aiming. And so the key here is that when you slide cancel, that it is not slide cancel aim. You should be doing slide aim cancel. And so what that looks like is going to be slide, aim, jump. And then the next kind of layer to that is that you have to work on getting your centering down. So you have to aim and be able to control your center dot towards the center of that hallway or doorway or wherever somebody might be. The next biggest thing that I see people struggle with that are more beginner to average level players is the fact that they are not utilizing cover to their advantage here. So if there is an enemy at the end of this hall that I am trying to fight here, the last thing I would want to do is strafe out and put myself here where I have absolutely nothing in front of me, which exposes my entire body here. Instead, what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to hug this corner, and I want to barely peek my body out, or at a minimum, I could get up and at least use like this chair or something, and then I could, crouch up and down, and I could kind of snake this and whatnot, so that I am not, so that I'm not fully exposing my body. And then that also ties into, it gives you an escape route. So let's say that we're in Warzone here, and let's say an enemy's down here. Let's say I come around here, and for some reason, this enemy is already aiming at me and he gets really good shots, and I take a bunch of damage here. If I recognize that I am low health, a lot of people, they just try to like YOLO it, and they just try to hope they win the gunfight. You have to be able to recognize when you are in a losing fight. So maybe another situation that might be better here is, let's say we're coming around here, I come around this corner, and oh crap, there are 2 or 3 enemies right in front of me. You have to recognize that is a losing battle. You are not going to win this no matter how good you are if you are outnumbered. So if you come around, recognize that you have an exit play, and you can run back and you can get out and you can reset that fight and live for another day. So we covered some basic game fundamentals. Now the biggest thing, and probably the number one thing that's going to make you be a better player, is improving your aim. What I have found to be by far the best option is, if you own the multiplayer, go into find a match and go down to a private match. Now, if you don't own multiplayer, I'm going to show you another alternative that is very good, but not quite as good as this. So from here, make sure you build a class. Usually you can do like an AR and an SMG, or I'm just going to do a double SMG. Both of these are going to apply, but if you struggle really at longer range fights, I'll give you some options for those as well. So in the game setup here, just put this on free-for-all for the map. A lot of options here. I would say the most efficient one is probably just doing Babylon, which is all the way to the far left. In the rules here, put the time limit to as high as you want. Same with the score limit. I just crank it up so you don't have to worry about it. Put the health up to at least 250. Technically, Warzone is 300 health, but multiplayer damages are different, and 250 actually is closer probably to a Warzone TTK, but it doesn't hurt to do a little bit more, because it just means you have to aim more. Health regen, I like to turn that up to fast. For the team, you don't really need to worry about this. If you want, you can put radar on, but it doesn't really matter. And I normally turn score streaks off, but again, that's not a big deal. And then go over here, like kind of behind my webcam, hit the plus button here, and then add 11 bots. And then for the difficulty, it's behind my webcam here, but so moved it out of the way for you guys here. So either casual or recruit. Casual is a newer setting, and it is like super low skill. They barely shoot at you. They're really, really bad. So if you're really new, trying to like figure some things out, figure out new settings, do casual. Recruit, they're still pretty bad, but they're going to be a little bit more realistic and shoot back at you. Regular, they're going to move a lot more. They're a lot harder. They're going to shoot you a lot more. So if you want a little bit more high intensity situation, regular is good, but it's harder to get more practice in because you're going to be getting shot at so much. So basically, I normally like recruit, but again, it doesn't really matter. All right, once we are in here, the first thing you're gonna do is go to your settings, go to controller, go over to aiming, and then turn your aim assist off. Your guys' aim is going to suck. You are going to struggle a lot here. But this is what I do every single day is I jump in here, and for about just 5 to 10 minutes, I will kill about 50 bots or so before I jump on and start playing with my aim assist off. Now, this forces you to be much more accurate and precise and have more control over your right stick. If your aim is pretty good with aim assist off, it is going to be phenomenal when your aim assist is on. And while you are doing this, this is also a perfect time for you to implement working on a movement here. So, every fight I try to slide cancel into it. I try to, jump slide, do any of those simple different movement mechanics and work on your aim. Also, make sure that you are constantly strafing while shooting. So you always should be maximally pressing on that left stick, because that is going to increase our aim assist, which I'm going to talk about here in just a moment again. Now, once you've killed, 50, 100 bots, however much you want to do for your practice, and the more the better. If you are really struggling, like if you want to put in and do 200, 300 bots a day, no aim assist, it will make your aim better. Once you've done enough, make sure you turn it back on before you go back in the game, and just get a few kills with your aim assist on, or especially if you're really struggling and new, do a lot like this too. And again, you're gonna start to now really feel that aim assist kick on, and you should notice your aim is significantly better. So if you do not own multiplayer, Resurgence Casual is phenomenal for getting practice in here. Go in, and I would honestly go in, turn your squad fill off, and just go in as a solo. So I actually, just like in the other mode, I will go in here and I will turn my aim assist off. Where the heck is it? There it is. So I will turn that off. Now, obviously, it's going to be hard. You're going to struggle at this, especially when you run into real players. It's going to be really hard to get kills, but most of the bots are horrible and they just float around, and it's great to practice some of those longer range, kind of mid-range fights. And what I would do is just focus on getting your loadout. So I'm actually going to grab the key card here. I have literally no ammo. And then I'm gonna head over from the key card that spawns here. Most of you guys probably know this, but you can go over to the big stronghold tower. And this is probably a real player. I think it was, but he still died. He actually had specialist because he was doing the other thing. And then if you deposit this, it will give you a loadout. Now that you have your loadout, especially if you want to work on long range, this is great, where you kind of just go to a tower and you just like practice shooting with your aim assist off. It is going to be very hard, obviously. You also at some point can just decide to leave your aim assist on and do that. But I think if you can get decent with aim assist off, your aim is going to be so good. As you can see, I am struggling a bit. So this is going to give you a lot more of those kind of like medium to long range practice, but of course you can, especially when you recognize you're fighting against bots, that's a good time to go up and push and get involved. That might be a real player, I'm not sure. Got him. Yeah, these are actually real players. But essentially, you guys get the idea here. So again, this is just gonna be another way of getting practice. It's just, you're gonna get not as many reps as you would from the multiplayer mode. But this is free. This levels up your gun as well. So it is a good option to do. So one last thing I wanna touch on really quick is just how aim assist works in Call of Duty, because it's very important to understand here. So there are two types of aim assist. There is your standard aim assist slowdown, where as I get closer, my aim just magically slows down when I'm near a target. I'm not changing how fast I'm moving my stick. So I get farther away, bam, see how it speeds up right there? Bam, slows down. Whenever there's a bubble around your enemies, that your sense just automatically slows down. However, there's also rotational aim assist. So if I move my left stick, I'm not even touching my right stick, you're gonna see my aim is slightly rotating towards this character here. And basically the take home is that when you are fighting, you just don't want to be completely standing still. As long as we are putting some pressure on our left stick, it is going to trigger that rotational aim assist. So at close quarters, you should be strafing, but even at long range, even if we're just moving a little bit, you're going to get that rotational aim assist, and that is going to massively improve your aim. So when we're doing our warm-ups and stuff, that's why I say make sure that you are working on strafing while shooting and that you are not standing completely still. So after that, the biggest thing I would say that's going to make you better ultimately is playtime and just getting reps in. If you are looking to work on just improving your one-on-one gunfights, probably the best thing that you can do is honestly play Resurgence solos. You're going to get a lot of good fights in against obviously real players, probably similar to your skill level. The next thing that you can start doing to kind of up that difficulty, to start improving your game decision making, is start playing solo versus duos. So do not fill Resurgence duos. And this is going to just, it's going to be very hard. You're going to have to fight outnumbered. It forces you to be very smart, play off of cover, make good decisions, all that stuff. And then lastly, what I would say is I have an entire section of videos called, or a playlist called Warzone Tips. I'd recommend you go through there. I have multiple videos, especially like the ranked videos where I'm breaking down my thought process, how I'm playing. And that's gonna be kind of like the last piece of the puzzle, is really improving your decision-making, game sense, all of that. But I will say, if you follow all these things, and especially if you're doing that aim warm-up every single day, just 50, maybe 100 bots per day, you will see a huge improvement. And then lastly, I would just say, when you are dying, when you're getting frustrated, try not to blame the game every time, and try to ask yourself, what could I have done better? Most of the time, instead of just being, oh, they were stacking, you could have been like, you know what, I could have I could have recognized that I was outnumbered and got away, or I could have been played off cover better, or I pushed into a bad situation, something like that. So regardless, guys, I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, leave a like, subscribe, come check out a stream here on YouTube. See you in the next one.